What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Western Power Rankings. We have already done the Eastern Conference. Go take a look at that. I've got 4 different categories: rebuilding, semi-competitive, playoff contenders, and of course, finals contenders in these power rankings for the Western Conference. There are a lot of different factors that I took into account here, but I'm going to go ahead and hop in. I'm actually going to talk about some of the things that I said in my previous power rankings that I'm going to have to correct because I was way off about some of these teams. But let's hop right into it. We're going to talk about the rebuilding teams first. And there are some exciting things to talk about with these teams, but there's also a lot of depression. For starters, the Dallas Mavericks. Probably the most depressed fan base on planet Earth. You're watching Luka Doncic right now at this point in the NBA season have a playoff type or an MVP type caliber playoff run ahead of him. He is playing as one of the top 5 players in the league. Sure, you got Cooper Flagg, but I don't think there's anybody talking about Cooper Flagg being a potential top 5 player in the next 2 or 3 seasons. Luka was already that guy. So this is an extremely depressing outlook right now for the Mavericks. Yes, they have the potential to get another top 10 selection. They're going to be nowhere near the number 1 spot. And I honestly, I don't believe that the NBA is rigged. I don't think the lottery is rigged. But if the NBA was going to rig it one way or the other, they're definitely not giving the Mavericks another number 1 overall selection. So that's definitely not happening. No chance in hell that happens. But that being said, looking at the Mavericks situation, the number 1 thing to consider is Kyrie Irving is still on this team. He's got 2 more years of contractual obligation. The Mavs are going to try to move him. The question is, where does he go and what is the Mavs' compensation? They're going to need to get a second star around Cooper Flagg. And quite frankly, he's playing at a pretty damn high level considering his usage as well as considering the teammates around him. He is not on a remotely close to good enough team to be playing this well. I think he could be a top 10 player in the league, but if he never gets the team around him, it's never going to happen. So a lot to be considered here with Dallas. Who's going to be their new GM now that Nico Harrison is gone? I made a TikTok about that. Briefly speaking, Mark Cuban allegedly is trying to regain control of the team, not ownership stake, but like making basketball decisions. He did that for years for the Mavericks. He still wants to do that as a minority owner. It's going to depend on who the GM ends up being. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but if it ends up being the assistant GM from the Pistons, that means Mark Cuban is still secretly making basketball decisions for the Mavericks. That's the first thing to consider. Second thing, like I already said, where is Kyrie Irving going to go? How are the Mavericks going to get a star around Cooper Flagg? Those are the storylines that have surrounded them throughout the entire season. Really interested to see what happens there during the offseason. Can they find a second star in the draft, maybe? It's all up to play. So now let's talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. And maybe this is the second most or maybe the third most depressing fan base in all of basketball. I mean, quite frankly, I've been to over a dozen Pelicans games in the last year or so. Not one time was that arena full, and they have one of the most exciting players in the NBA. I watched Zion Williamson go toe-to-toe with LeBron James and Anthony Davis just 2 seasons ago in the play-in, a 40-point performance, and it was unbelievable what he was doing in the paint. He was wreaking havoc like he does when he plays healthy. But the problem was, in that play-in game and for a lot of the regular season, he just cannot stay healthy. So the Pelicans traded away their 2026 unprotected first-round pick to get Derek Queen from Maryland. He's had a solid rookie season, but damn, would you like to have Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer or AJ DeBansta in this draft? I'm sure they would. The Atlanta Hawks are licking their paws thinking about what is going to be in store for them with a young asset to put next to Jalen Johnson. This is a depressing Pelicans fan base right now. They have no draft capital here. They have a bunch of young players that don't really line up together. Herb Jones is one of the best defenders in the league. He has been having to take on a larger offensive role because this Pelicans backcourt is not talented whatsoever. I like Jeremiah Fears, the point guard that they drafted from Oklahoma. It seems like he's got some ball dominant type play in his bag, but not ready to take over that spot as a ball dominant guard. Jordan Poole having the worst season of his career. That's not a good sign, especially considering that the Pelicans traded for him to begin with. There's just not a lot of hope. Trey Murphy, Zion, those are the two exciting pieces there in New Orleans. I want to see what they do in the offseason, but quite frankly, it doesn't seem like they can do much. Now let's talk about the Utah Jazz. They've made some interesting moves at the trade deadline, trading for Jaren Jackson Jr. This is going to be one of the tallest lineups in NBA history if they keep the roster as it is right now. Walker Kessler at center coming back. I believe he's 7 foot or 7'1". Lauri Markkanen at the 3. He's 6'10 or 6'11". Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4. He's also 6'10, 6'11". This Jazz lineup, honestly, outside of Kessler, is really tall, but not great rebounders. And, Kessler doesn't stretch the floor well. Jackson can stretch the floor well, but he's not really a shot creator. Neither is Lauri Markkanen, so they're going to need a bag getter at point guard, but they also kind of need a distributor. So Keyonte George, how does he fit into this puzzle piece, averaging 20 points a game in his third year? There's a lot of things to be considered here with Utah. And then last but certainly not least, the Sacramento Kings. And I kind of put them in between that Mavericks and Pelicans conversation for depressing fan bases. You have a bunch of aging players that are not really tradable. You're probably going to have to do some buyouts either this season or next. I don't really know what their plan was. They had Fox and Sabonis. They made the playoffs, took the Warriors to 7 games that season just 3 years ago, where the Warriors won their championship. The Warriors won their championship that season, and they took that team to 7 games. And then they just blew it all up. They traded Fox to San Antonio. They got DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. They just traded for DeAndre Hunter. Just doesn't seem like this Kings organization really knows where they're going, but they're probably going to end up with a top 4 selection and a franchise piece. So this could be an organization that could turn it around fairly quickly, but it's all going to depend on what they do with some of these older players, LaVine, DeRozan, DeAndre Hunter, and Domantas Sabonis. We'll have to wait and see what happens there as well. Now the semi-competitive teams. And there were several teams in here that I have placed elsewhere previously. The Phoenix Suns, they've had a lot of injury concerns over the season, some suspension concerns as well. Dylan Brooks is always a guy that you're just not really sure what you're going to get from him. Jalen Green has been injured a lot. Devin Booker, my God. There's not another person that I feel worse for in the NBA right now than Devin Booker, signing that massive contract extension. You can't feel too bad because he's got like 280 million reasons not to leave Phoenix, Arizona. But man, this Suns roster is just not built for championship contention. The Trailblazers are in an interesting spot. They're not bad enough to tank, but they're not nearly good enough to compete at a high level. The Los Angeles Clippers have decided to blow it up, but as long as Kawhi Leonard is here on this roster, they're not a championship contender. They're a competitive roster, though. I like what they've got going. If they could somehow move Kawhi to another team for multiple firsts, this is an organization that's in a really good spot, especially, ladies and gentlemen, if there's not another more important storyline to watch in the draft lottery than what happens to the Indiana Pacers pick. I talked about this in my Eastern Conference Power Ranking, so if you've already seen it, I got a little bit more for you. The Clippers currently have the Pacers first round pick. However, it is protected picks 1 through 4 and 10 through 30, meaning if the pick in the lottery lands from 1 to 4 or 10 to 30, the Pacers get their pick back. But if it's 5 through 9, the Clippers retain the pick. And there are franchise pieces to be had in 5 to 9. To me, this is one of the most talented drafts in NBA history. The Clippers are begging for this pick. And right now, it's a 52-48 split on the chances of it being a first through 4th or a 5th through 9th. Gonna have to see how that plays out to see what the Clippers decide to do. They've got some big contract extensions coming up in this offseason, specifically Benedict Mathurin, who they just traded for, and he's averaging 20 points a game for the Clippers right now. So want to see what happens there. Golden State, I have no idea what's going on in Golden State. I think what they're going to try to do is make one more finals push next season. They'll have Stephen Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, potentially Kristaps Porzingis, and some other role players to go with them for next year. But maybe Kristaps Porzingis might not even come back. He is on an expiring contract. I just don't really know. I think he was expecting a really breakout season with the Atlanta Hawks. That didn't work out. And now he's with Golden State. Made a video about his Potts diagnosis. Go check that out if you're really missing out on some Warriors content there. And then last but not least, the Grizzlies. They have entered into full tank mode, but for some reason have not been able to lose as many basketball games as some of these others. Ja Morant, what's going to happen to him? There's a lot of what ifs here in this particular group. A lot of aging players, like with the Blazers, Damian Lillard. With the Suns, it's kind of Devin Booker. I mean, he's already 29 years old. Kawhi with the Clippers, Curry, Draymond, Jimmy with the Warriors, and then Ja Morant. What do the Grizzlies decide to do with him? All of these guys may or may not be moving to different teams going forward. So these are all organizations to kind of watch. They're teetering the rebuild, but they're not there just quite yet because the older players on this roster complete winning or contend too much. They're too competitive on these rosters to full tank. Sorry about that. Had to think about it for a second. That makes sense. Now we're going to talk about the playoff teams. There are some really good playoff teams in the West. As a matter of fact, if any of these teams were in the East, they would probably be the favorite or maybe the second favorite to come out of the East for me. The first team I want to talk about is the Denver Nuggets, and they really teeter the line of finals contention. And the only reason I say that is because they have borderline the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic, three-time MVP Nikola Jokic. He is still one of the best offensive players in the league. What has happened recently, though, is that teams are starting to target him defensively, and it seems to be working. Jamal Murray is having, or was having, or kind of still is having a career year. He is going to have to play like he did versus the Utah Jazz back in the bubble when he was dropping like 50 points. If he can play at that high a level and Aaron Gordon still plays at his peak performance that he had last year where he was dropping like 30 bombs in the playoffs, this Nuggets team can contend for a finals run. But I have not seen it all lay out perfectly. Michael Porter Jr. was a more than serviceable defender. I cannot currently say the same about Cam Johnson. So the Nuggets in a 7-game series versus my finals contenders in this conference, right now it doesn't add up. Now, they probably played OKC the absolute best last year in the playoffs, took them to 7 games. OKC won that series. I think they got a little bit worse comparatively from last year, and OKC and some other teams have gotten better. Next up, the Houston Rockets. Once again, this would be a playoff contending team if they had a point guard. Cannot rip the Rockets organization enough for not going out and grabbing a PG for Kevin Durant, Amin Thompson, Alperen Sengun. Ime Udoka, who I think is a top 10 coach in the league, has kind of made me question that because Kevin Durant has... I'm really not sure what kind of role he has here with this organization. Is he a vocal leader? Is he not? What's going on with the burner allegations, right? It seems that this Rockets teammate chemistry has just not been there all season long. Down the stretch of games, they are one of the worst clutch performers out of all these playoff teams that I'm talking about, East and West. So there's just a lot of question marks to be had about this team. I'm not buying them, but if they get into a gritty series with a Minnesota or a Denver, they can win a playoff series for sure. Next up, though, we're going to talk about the team that I think ideally matches up with them the best, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is in the top 5 players of the league conversation. There's no doubt about it. I think he's been there now for 2 seasons. What has really been a compliment to his game is his ability to shoot the rock. We talk about players, if they can get a jump shot, the quote, oh, they're so good, and if they could get a jump shot, that'd be even better. Anthony Edwards developed that, and you have got to give him credit for all the lab work that he did to develop that. He's cranking 10 threes a night on 40% shooting. I mean, 10 years ago, this is unheard of from a primary scorer like outside of Stephen Curry. So Ant-Man, you got to give him props. This Timberwolves roster, though, the reason I don't put them in finals contention is just because they're not deep enough, and they also don't have enough volume scoring outside of Anthony Edwards. You're asking Anthony Edwards, especially similar to Houston, the Timberwolves need a point guard. You're asking Ant to distribute the basketball. He does not do that at a high level at all. I actually made an entire video about their struggles as an organization trying to make Anthony Edwards the primary distributor with the basketball. It does not work. Their offense is too stagnant. I think they need to have more sets that they run, especially down the stretch of games. I'm hesitant on the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I will say, looking at the rest of these teams, he's gone out and beaten Stephen Curry in the playoffs. He beat the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron in the playoffs. And he beat Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns in the playoffs. So this is not a guy who shies away from competition. The ego is through the roof, and rightfully so. Anthony Edwards is a top 5 player. I can never count the Timberwolves out of a series, especially if he's hot from behind the arc. Now, last but certainly not least, one of my favorite teams, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers, and of course they are one of my favorite teams because of LeBron James. This team looks completely different than they did just one season ago, not in terms of roster construction, but in terms of how they're playing the game of basketball. LeBron James is now the third option on the offensive side of the basketball. Luka is stepping up on the defensive end in kind of a miraculous way. You did not really expect that as of late. Austin Reeves, can he be an elite second option on a championship roster? I think the jury's out right now. I don't know if anybody could make a decision on whether that's a yes or a no definitively yet. I want to see what it looks like in this playoff series. But Luka on offense, of course, is a generational, once-in-a-lifetime talent for an organization. You know, holistically in the NBA, there are other guys currently in the league that are just as good as him offensively. But you want this guy on your roster, even with all of the issues that he's dealing with complaining to refs, his defensive liability. It doesn't matter. You want him on your roster right now. Luka's playing at an MVP level. LeBron in transition is kind of playing like he used to back in like the Miami Heat days. And that's saying something because he's 41 and like almost every night the Lakers play, you see a highlight of him on social media cramming it. It just blows my mind. A guy that, you know, when I was a kid, my dad was 41 years old. I never thought about my dad rising up and slamming it down on another grown man's head. And LeBron James is doing that on a night in, night out basis. Just unfreaking believable what we see from this guy every single night. Now let's talk about the finals contenders. There's only 2. Now, with the East, I said that there's 4 finals contenders, and that's because those 4 teams do not have to play these 2 teams. In my opinion, whoever comes out of this series together is going to end up winning the finals, OKC and San Antonio. Now, there are a couple of factors to consider here. Both teams have not had the healthiest of rosters. Wemby is 1 game short of missing the 65-game cutoff to win Defensive Player of the Year, be contending for MVP and All-NBA awards. Meanwhile, Jalen Williams for OKC has been just not healthy all season long. Came in with that wrist injury from last year and has struggled with some other injuries, I believe, throughout the season. But these 2 organizations are unbelievably well run and have been now for 20 years. Think about that. Back in 2006, 2007, OKC was getting Kevin Durant, and then they drafted Russell Westbrook, and then they drafted James Harden. With San Antonio 20 years ago, they were contending with Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili. Then they go out and get Kawhi Leonard. Then they, of course, they had that transition period with DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, but then they go out, they get Wemby, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, a ton of other really solid players. Keldon Johnson's probably going to be 6th man of the year. Both of these rosters are pretty damn deep. They have a lot of different, diversity in the way that they play the game. Wemby has really come on as, quite frankly, hands down the best defender in the NBA. And he's very capable on the perimeter. This is not a Rudy Gobert Defensive Player of the Year. Wemby is dangerous outside of the inner circle of the paint. He can do it all offensively and defensively. Where I give the edge to OKC in terms of my power rankings, who do I think is better? I give OKC the upper hand, number 1, because they've done it before. But number 2, I think they're a little deeper, and SGA is currently still on a different level than Wemby right now. What I need to see in Wemby's growth, especially in these playoff series, is his ability to create off the dribble. For a big man his size, it's unbelievable. It's better than Naz Reid or any other big man creator that you can think of. The problem is that you need to have Kevin Durant type numbers to be able to win these basketball games. And that's like a very high compliment. Wemby is the best big man creator that I can think of off the top of my head right now in the league, but it's just not quite there that he's putting up elite type numbers. And that's what you need to beat OKC and then beat a team in the Eastern Conference when it comes to the finals. So those are my power rankings for the West. I think these are really interesting. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Who am I missing out on? Who did I get wrong? If you go back and watch the power rankings that I did earlier this season, I think I had the Warriors as a final contender. I mean, how wrong was that? My goodness. But I mean, injuries, of course, happen all the time. Steph's been out for weeks. Jimmy Butler's been out for months. Pods has played like a shell of himself. Porzingis, of course, dealing with his POTS diagnosis. This, that, and the third, right? Let's talk about these two teams as the finals contenders for the West. Be sure to leave a comment, like, subscribe. It is unbelievably appreciated. I love each and every one of you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.